let's talk about processing them, because you can obviously see that, you know, we've got the clean kicks down. Let's start getting a bit murkier. Let's start melting a few faces. Let's see where we go in the more sort of techno direction. Now, if you listen to a lot of those techno records, again, they have that combination of like lots of body, but then they also have a lot of processing. And again, they're distorted, but they also sound quite clean. So all interesting stuff there. And again, but they don't tend to be quite as attacky as they do. Say, for example, if you're listening to a Plex record or a Tale of Us record or anything else for that matter. So I'm just going to zoom the old screen back out here, and you can see that here on the overall group, I actually have some processing. I'm just going to get rid of that comment there from Dan. So yeah, so basically I've got a saturator, a drum bus, and a third party effect. So I am a big user of this thing. If I bring this over, of the decapitator, this thing is just phenomenal, and I'm a massive fan of it, and I've been using it for years. And let's face it, you have to absolutely respect a plugin that has a punish button. It's as simple as that. Very, very cool. So yeah, we're going to be working with that quite a bit as well, and it'll give you different textures that you can go for. So each one of these will give you a different look and a different feel. So let's say, for example, you know, we go for something like, you know, the collective kick. I mean, sorry, not the collective kick, but the kick 2. We'll go back to there, and then we'll see what we can do with a little bit of distortion. I feel like I want to drop that down a little bit. So maybe I want to just put the pitch on here, and again you can put the sub control on, and again you can hear that reaching for the lasers there. There you go. So again, a lot of techno kicks tend to be lower pitched, and again C1 is the root note for kick 2. So again, I'm using this because I've rounded this attack off, and there's not really any attack on this at all. It's just a nice round kick, and again we can add them in using the other techniques we've looked at, but ultimately I want to start really getting into the saturation phase here. So the saturator itself in Ableton, amazing tool for this, and you can get that real interesting kind of sound going. As you can see, I've already been doing some experimentations with this, but we'll put this back to 0. So one thing I would say about the saturator is always take out in output what you put in drive. So it's very similar to compression in that when you, let's say, compress something by 3 dB, you can put 3 dB of makeup gain back in to make up for the lost volume or the lost amplitude. With drive, where a lot of people kind of go wrong is that they drive the balls out of something and then wonder why everything's clipping and sounds really dirty, but they haven't what's the word I'm looking for, compensated for that with the output. So ultimately we can definitely do that. So if I put in, like, say, you know, 8 dB of gain, I would take out 8 dB here. And again, I'm just using the analog clip here to start off with. And you'll, again, it's a very light sound. But if I keep going, you'll hear things start to come apart and start to come a little bit stressed. So Sinise is asking here, what is the saturator equivalent in Logic? The equivalent in Logic, I would use the overdrive for this, which is one of my favorite plugins, not just in Logic, but of any DAW. That overdrive is disgustingly good. It really is great. Just the regular overdrive plugin is absolutely brilliant. And yeah, they've got loads of little distortion plugins like the clip distortion, yada yada yada, etc. So yeah, I mean, that's the winner for me. Also, as well, if you do want to just overall warm something up in Logic, one of the tricks that you can use, which you may see on my YouTube channel, on the MYT YouTube channel, is I use the compressor, the stock compressor, but I put the distortion on soft clip, it's like a soft distortion mode, but I keep it on the platinum digital mode. It's absolutely brilliant, well worth a look. And again, the great thing about all of these kick design techniques, I could be doing this in Logic as well. Like, this is completely DAW agnostic, so to speak. So yeah, basically here with the Saturator, if I just zoom in on this particular part of the screen as well. So I'm just going to go to the bottom corner, get that right. There you go. Happy days. So you can see here I'm putting 13 dB in, but taking 8 out. So I can take, again, minus 13. And it keeps things really level. And you start to get that, okay, that's slightly techno-y. Like, that's got that vibe to it. It's got that crunchy but clean thing to it. Now, if you did want to drive the absolute balls off it, you can. I mean, you could just go all the way to 36 and get into happy hardcore if you wanted to. But if we were to... There's like an edge there around about 20 dB. Use the dry and wet. Because, you know, that's what it's there for, right? So you can balance it off with the dry and wet. Add the soft clip as well, because that's going to roll on the saturation a little more gradually. Okay, so now we've got that there, like kind of where we want it, right? Then the next tool we can use either individually or outside is the drum bus, which I am absolutely in love with. This is like one of the big reasons to upgrade to Live 10 if you haven't already. Now, drum bus, again, you could use as a Logic equivalent. You could use things like the regular compressor with the soft clip on, like I mentioned, or any of those kind of classic compressor models are really, really good. Again, as a third-party situation, you could use something like, I'm just thinking, I mean, FabFilter Saturn is an amazing thing for this type of thing, but I use that in a slightly different way in a sound design element, but I'd show you that in a subsequent masterclass. But yeah, I mean, you can add in if I just turn this off and on, you can hear it just brings everything out. Even with 20%, even with 0. I mean, if you listen to this at 0, it just really firms up the kick. So I actually quite like to use this not only on the overall drum group in a production, I also like to use it individually on a kick. Because what it's going to allow me to do as well, and this is where you can get really clever, is that you can offset the saturator and the dry and wet of the drum bus. And you've also got a damping feature here. Which you can hear is like quite a subtle kind of low pass filter, essentially. Very similar to for, you know, in Logic, where you've got the filter or the tone control on the overdrive plugin. So that's quite cool. Okay, so seeing a few questions come in, I'm going to address them just after this little section, so don't think I'm ignoring you, all right? Everyone's questions will be talked about and answered and covered by the end, okay? So, the next thing I can do there, and again, I don't really need to add any more drive or crunch because I've got the saturator to do that. I mean, you can, but you can see I'm just offsetting the dry and wet on both of them here to get the result that I want. And you can get more crunch if you want. It's quite nice there, actually. And we can add a little bit of boom here. Now, the boom and the frequency are kind of linked. So what you can see down here is the frequency is at 50 hertz. This here, G0 plus, that is the key. So this actually refers to the key of the kick itself. So if we open up kick 2 here, you might be able to see, I'm just going to bring that down a little bit. You can see here we're on 39 hertz. So what I can then do is on the processing here, I could then drop this down, if I want to 39 hertz. So now the boom is in key with the fundamental harmonic of the kick itself. And the decay, it's almost like a sub-generator that's going underneath the kick, which is quite nice. So a final touch here would be to add in some transients. And there's a couple of different ways we can do that. Now, one way is to use the transients control here, and another one is to use a third-party plugin, which is absolutely fantastic, which is called Transient Master from Native Instruments. And it's a brilliant thing. It really, really is. So we'll get into that in a short moment. But you'll hear, if I tweak the transients up, it's going to give me that little bit of attack. Okay, we'll put an EQ on there just to sweeten that right at the end. So that little bit of transient there, you can hear is just making that little distorted edge just pop out, and we're starting again to get into that, the whole, again, more techno-y, flappy, quite aggressive, quite long sort of kick. Again, we're at 124 here, so we could knock that up to 127 to give you an idea. And you can hear there that when the transients go into the negative, they tend to shorten the sustain, and then obviously the attacks are left over. So Transient Master, brilliant little thing. Really, really cool. So let's just investigate this. It's a really simple plugin, and you'll see what I mean. So I've taken the transients off, and we can really control the kick this way. Now, I actually really like that with slightly less attack and more sustain. That's a really, really nice sort of sweet spot there. And again, I can smooth that attack curve out if I want to, which means that it will just apply it a little less aggressively. Now, to sort of really finish off on this kick, I could add in a glue compressor and then just add in a little bit of, again, fast attack, relatively long release. And again, a little bit of sweetening with the EQ here just to sit the low mid down a little bit so it's not too aggressive. And then a little bit on the top end just to take that buzziness out just a touch. Now, I might just dial back a little bit on the drive here. And then there you go. Another way that we can get there is, again, utilising our old friend, the decapitator. So let's have a little look at that. We can look at these guys as well. And essentially, we might be able to get a very different result. So one of the big rules about sound design in general, which I'll tell you about right now, is you can get halfway there with the sound itself, and then the rest of it, it's about how you process it. So I'm just going to zoom out completely here so you can see the whole thing, because I was just aware I may have missed that out on the old zoom in on the screen there. So, decapitator. You can get some crazy shit just by switching the thing on. So let's listen to the kick on its own. And you can hear it's already having a bit of an effect, and it's kind of rounding things off a little bit. So even doing something like that, 0 drive, punish on, A mode, rolling the tone down towards dark, high cutting right the way down to, around about, I don't know, a couple of thousand hertz, something like that, just by ear. And again, what I would maybe need to do here is just roll down. And yeah, we're into, a completely different territory again. And again, what you can get with the different styles here are the different styles of distortion unit within Decapitator that give you very, very different sounds. That's really nice. Now you can hear there's like a little bit of like crackle and aliasing going on there, but we can turn the punish off and we can then decide to dial in the amount that we want. And again, use the transient master, etc. So let's just do a final dial through of those different styles of distortion units. I mean, that's just nasty. That's really cool. Or you can use all three, which is a bit overkill, but you can get good results if you dial back on the dry wets. And as you can hear, there's dramatically different results depending upon what order in the signal chain. So experiment with swapping your distortion layers around.